Tom Brady seems to be playing a significant role in shaping the future of the Las Vegas Raiders, and a recent report sheds some light on how his influence is affecting the team's decisions. According to the article, the Raiders were initially uncertain about firing both head coach Antonio Pierce and general manager Tom Tesco. Owner Mark Davis had some reservations about letting them go, as he wanted to maintain some consistency moving forward. However, Tom Brady, who became a part owner of the Raiders in October, apparently pushed Davis to make a bold decision and let both of them go. Vincent Bonsignore's report reveals that as recently as last week, there was still a chance Pierce and Tesco might stay for another season. Even with the team's disappointing 4-13 record, Davis was considering giving them more time. But Brady, who is now heavily involved in the team's direction, felt a complete reset was necessary. He persuaded Davis to make the tough call to fire both men and is expected to lead the search for their replacements. This move is notable because it shows just how much power Brady now has over the Raiders' decision-making process. Some might find it surprising that Davis is allowing Brady to have such a significant say, but it's hard to deny Brady's credentials. As one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game, with 7 Super Bowl rings, Brady clearly understands what it takes to build a winning team. Personally, I was a bit taken aback when Tom Tesco was fired. I thought he did a solid job as general manager, especially in terms of drafting and making smart free agent signings. While it's generally not the best strategy to rely heavily on free agency, Tesco made decisions that seem to align with building a solid foundation for the team. While it's often said that building a team through free agency isn't the best long-term strategy, there are still key impact players that can be brought in through this route, especially when it comes to positions like offensive tackle, defensive lineman, or cornerback. Tom Tesco, in his first year as general manager of the Raiders, made some strong moves in free agency, notably bringing in star players like defensive tackle Christian Wilkins and superstar tight end. He also secured a standout center for the team, which showed he had a keen eye for talent and addressed major needs. Even though the Raiders didn't have a successful season, with a poor win-loss record, I felt Tom Tesco did a solid job in his first year. Building a championship team takes time, and it's unrealistic to expect a Super Bowl win in year one. Success requires the right coaching staff, a good balance of talent, and careful management of the salary cap. Considering the challenges he inherited, such as dealing with the fallout of the previous regime's wasted draft picks and mismanagement, I thought he performed admirably. On the other hand, I didn't completely agree with the hiring of Antonio Pierce as head coach, so I understand that decision. However, when it comes to firing Tom Tesco, I felt that might not have been the right call. That said, I do see why it happened, especially with Tom Brady's growing influence within the organization. Brady has become a key figure in pushing for changes within the team, and it's clear that owner Mark Davis has been heavily influenced by his opinion. While Brady's impact has been undeniable, it's important to remember that he won't be involved in the day-to-day operations of the Raiders. We still need a new general manager, and there's a lot more work to be done. One potential candidate could be Ben Johnson, the Detroit Lions offensive coordinator, who is familiar with Ray Agnew, the Lions assistant general manager. If Johnson takes the Raiders' job, Agnew might be a logical fit as the new general manager. The idea of a reset for the Raiders, as pushed by Tom Brady, is an intriguing one. It's clear that the team needs a fresh start, and while it's not a decision everyone may agree with, I don't necessarily disagree with the approach. A reset could be exactly what the Raiders need to get back on track. What's especially interesting is how Brady's influence has led to significant shifts in the team's direction. One of the most surprising outcomes of Brady's growing role in the Raiders' front office is the interview with Ben Johnson, the Detroit Lions offensive coordinator. According to a report by Albert Breer, the Raiders were not initially on Johnson's radar, and without Brady's involvement, it's unlikely they would have even secured an interview. Johnson had been focused on interviews with the Bears, Jaguars, and Patriots, but Brady's push, via intermediaries, made the difference, convincing Johnson to consider the Raiders as a legitimate option. This development is fascinating because, up until now, Ben Johnson had made it clear he wasn't interested in interviewing for any job, unless he was sure he wanted to take it. Adam Schefter reported that Johnson had only planned to interview for the Bears job, as that was the one he was most interested in. So for the Raiders to land an interview means Johnson is at least considering them, which speaks volumes about the impact of Brady's influence. One advantage the Raiders might have over teams like the Bears and Jaguars is the stability in their front office. The Bears are sticking with Ryan Poles as their general manager, and the Jaguars are committed to Trent Baalke. Both teams are unlikely to make changes at the GM level anytime soon. For Johnson, this means that if he took a job with either of those teams, he would be working with a GM he's not familiar with. In contrast, if he comes to the Raiders, he'll have the opportunity to work with a new general manager, which could make the job more attractive. If Ben Johnson were to take the Raiders' job, it would likely mean he's working with a general manager he's already familiar with, someone who values his input on roster building and strategy. This kind of collaboration could be crucial in making the team successful in the long term. In fact, I agree with Tom Brady's approach. Bringing in someone like Johnson, who has the ability to help shape the future of the team, is a smart move. It's yet another selling point for the Raiders as they look to make major changes. Speaking of the Raiders' future, another interesting development is their search for a head coach. It was reported that Denver Broncos defensive coordinator Vance Joseph is set to interview for the Raiders' head coaching position. Some people have speculated that this could be a token interview for the Rooney Rule, but I disagree. First, the Raiders have already satisfied the Rooney Rule with their previous interview with Robert Saleh, so this isn't just about checking a box. Vance Joseph, despite his prior head coaching stint with the Broncos, has proven to be a solid defensive coordinator. His ability to run defensive schemes effectively has contributed to the Broncos' success, which is why he's being considered by the Raiders. What's also intriguing is a trend that's emerging from the list of candidates the Raiders are interested in. Out of the 7 potential head coach candidates, 5 of them are defensive coaches. This is noteworthy because, traditionally, I'd argue that the Raiders should be focusing on hiring an offensive-minded coach. The NFL is an offensive-driven league, and having an innovative offensive mind could give the team a competitive edge. While defensive coaches can certainly be valuable, I believe it's more important to prioritize offensive leadership when making such a pivotal hire. After all, good defense can always be found, but an effective offense is often the key to long-term success. Finding top-tier offensive coaches is no easy task. There are only a handful of coaches who consistently run great offenses, guys like Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan, who stand out for their innovative play calling and ability to adapt. On the other hand, you have coaches like Arthur Smith and Josh McDaniels, who are solid but not necessarily exceptional. When it comes to building a successful team, having an offensive mastermind at the helm can make all the difference. That's why the Raiders' apparent focus on defensive coaches in their head coaching search is interesting and somewhat puzzling. The Raiders have already reached out to a number of candidates, and of the 7 or 8 coaches they've shown interest in, 6 are defensive-minded. This includes some big names like Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions, Steve Spagnuolo of the Kansas City Chiefs, and Robert Saleh, the Jets' head coach. Even Pete Carroll, the Seattle Seahawks head coach, is a defensive guy, although he hasn't been calling defensive plays in recent years. Vance Joseph, another defensive coach, is also in the mix, along with Mike Vrabel, the head coach of the Tennessee Titans, who's known for his defensive approach. Interestingly, it was also reported that Mike Vrabel was approached by Tom Brady about the Raiders' head coaching position, but he made it clear that he was committed to the Patriots' job and wasn't interested in interviewing for the Raiders. This news came from CBS, who quoted Vrabel as telling Brady that he had already decided on New England. So it seems that the Raiders have made efforts to reach out to a wide variety of candidates, but the focus has largely been on defensive leaders. This trend is intriguing because, while defense is undeniably important, it seems like the Raiders may be leaning toward a defensive-minded approach, rather than seeking an offensive guru who could help ignite the team's offense. Given the talent on the roster and the importance of a high-powered offense in today's NFL, it would make sense for the Raiders to consider an offensive coach as their top priority. Nonetheless, the fact that so many of the candidates are defensive coaches suggests the Raiders might be prioritizing stability and leadership on that side of the ball. It's interesting to see the Raiders' approach in focusing so heavily on defensive-minded head coaching candidates. Perhaps this is because some offensive coordinators are still tied up with teams in the playoffs, such as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or the Houston Texans, where the Raiders might not have had access to reach out yet. Whatever the reason, the overwhelming focus on defense is worth noting. Despite the current trends, I believe this is an exciting time to be invested in the Raiders' future. If the team can secure a strong general manager and head coach, there's a real chance for success. A great coaching staff is foundational to building a successful franchise. It's a lesson we saw with the Miami Dolphins a few years ago, when they hired Mike McDaniel. At first, there were doubts about whether he could succeed as a head coach, but now, after a few years at the helm, he's proven to be a solid leader, largely due to the Dolphins' high-powered offense. While some may question Tua Tagovailoa's ability to take the Dolphins all the way, it's clear that Mike McDaniel has helped create one of the league's most dynamic offenses. If the Dolphins can eventually upgrade their quarterback, they could become a true contender. This is what happens when you have the right coach running an offense. Success tends to follow year after year. Look at Sean McVay with the Los Angeles Rams. Since his arrival, the Rams have been consistently competitive, and McVay has shown he can adapt even when things aren't perfect, such as losing key players like their star quarterback or an all-time great defensive lineman. The key takeaway is that a solid coach, particularly one with a strong offensive mindset, can turn a team into a perennial contender. Kyle Shanahan with the San Francisco 49ers is another example. Even in years where they've had struggles or injuries, as long as the team is built well, Shanahan's influence ensures they stay competitive. For the Raiders, it will be crucial to make the right decision when hiring a head coach who can shape their offense and lead them to long-term success. For the Raiders, the key to success will largely come down to hiring the right coach, and I strongly believe Ben Johnson should be the top choice. He's the kind of leader who can make a real difference for the team, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. However, I wouldn't rule out other candidates like Bobby Slowick, the Texans' offensive coordinator. Slowick has shown he can develop a strong offense, and if the Raiders decide to go in that direction, he could be a solid choice. As for Todd Monken, the Ravens' offensive coordinator, he has helped Lamar Jackson have one of his best seasons yet, so he's definitely worth considering, though I'm still a bit unsure about him being the right fit for the head coach role. When it comes to hiring from the defensive side, like we saw with Antonio Pierce, you're always at the mercy of the offensive play caller to truly succeed. That's why I'd lean toward hiring an offensive-minded head coach, someone who can shape the offense and take it to the next level. However, it's important not to overlook Patrick Graham, the Raiders' current defensive coordinator, as a head coach candidate. I know it's not a popular suggestion and many might prefer to bring in someone with a proven track record as a head coach. But Graham is well respected within the locker room, and he's had success running the Raiders' defense. Unlike Antonio Pierce, who didn't have a major role in designing schemes or calling plays, Patrick Graham has proven himself in those areas. He could bring continuity to the team and keep the defensive system intact while taking on a leadership role as head coach. Of course, hiring Graham would be similar to bringing in any of the other defensive-minded candidates like Steve Spagnuolo or Aaron Glenn, and I'm not entirely sold on going that route. But if the Raiders do decide to go down the defensive path, Patrick Graham should absolutely be in the conversation. His deep understanding of the current defense and his established relationship with the team could be valuable in maintaining consistency and building success over the next few years. The Raiders would get the same defensive coordinator for a fourth year, which could provide a sense of stability for the defense, while the new head coach focuses on managing the entire team. At this point, it may be easier for the Raiders to simply replace their offensive coach if needed, rather than completely revamping both sides of the ball, especially if they're sticking with Patrick Graham as head coach. I believe Graham is a very capable coach and will likely get a head coaching opportunity in the next couple of years, whether it's with the Raiders or another team. His track record and respect within the Raiders' locker room make him a solid candidate. However, with Tom Tesco being let go, it seems unlikely that Graham will be considered for the head coaching role now, since keeping Tesco would have made more sense if they were planning to promote Graham. Still, I hope Graham gets a chance as a head coach soon, regardless of where it happens. There's been a lot of news circulating about the Raiders' coaching search, and it's clear that there's a lot of speculation and rumors out there. Some of the reports we've been discussing come from credible insiders like Albert Breer and Vincent Bonsignore, who have direct connections to the team. Bonsignore, in particular, isn't just a beat reporter, he's someone with real ties to the Raiders and is a trusted source for team-related information. So when he shares something, it's important to pay attention to it. Now, I want to hear from you. If you had the chance to choose any one of these head coach candidates, who would you pick? There are a lot of options on the table, each with their strengths and weaknesses, but which one stands out to you as the best fit for the Raiders? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more updates. I'll catch you next time with another video.